The signature on the check was his. The faith in his heart was real. But the man in the priest's collar was neither holy nor honest. And by the time Thomas realized it, $47,000 of his life savings had vanished into a lie. Wrapped in prayer. Nobody hears a scream when it's wrapped in hymns. Anyway, Thomas Harper's scream was exactly like that. Silent, buried beneath prayers, invisible to everyone around him. Those who saw him still saw the faithful man. The 69-year-old retired high school teacher who never missed Sunday service, who volunteered at the food bank, who still believed that good people existed in the world. But Thomas didn't know he was walking toward the greatest betrayal of his life. Or rather, he saw the signs but chose to ignore them, because humans are most vulnerable when they need to believe in something greater than themselves. Thomas lived in a modest house in Detroit's Brightmoor neighborhood, in a quiet street where American flags hung from porches and neighbors still knew each other's names. He had taught history at Cass Technical High School for 40 years before retiring 5 years ago. His wife, Eleanor, had died 3 years earlier from cancer. Since then, the house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that hurt to touch. The only place where Thomas felt truly at peace was St. Augustine's Church, a small brick building at the corner of Grand River Avenue, where he had worshipped for over 2 decades. But everything changed when Father David Mercer arrived. It was a Sunday morning in late September 2019 when Thomas first saw him. The previous priest, Father Raymond, had retired after 30 years of service. The congregation had been nervous about the replacement. Change always made people nervous, especially in matters of faith. But when Father David stepped up to the pulpit, something shifted in the room. He was younger than they expected, maybe in his early 40s, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples, and a voice that seemed to reach into your chest and touch something deep inside. His sermon that day was about second chances, about how God never abandons those who have lost their way. Thomas felt tears on his cheeks before he even realized he was crying. After the service, Father David made it a point to greet everyone personally. When he reached Thomas, he didn't just shake his hand. He held it with both of his own, looked directly into Thomas's eyes, and said, "I can see you're carrying something heavy. God sent me here for people like you." Thomas felt seen. For the first time since Eleanor's death, someone seemed to actually see him. Over the following weeks, Father David's presence became more prominent in Thomas's life. He called Thomas personally to check on him. He visited Thomas's home for coffee, sitting in the living room and listening, really listening, as Thomas talked about Eleanor, about the loneliness, about feeling like his purpose had died with her. Father David never rushed him, never looked at his watch, never made Thomas feel like a burden. He prayed with Thomas, his voice rich and certain, and for the first time in years, Thomas felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone. "God has a special plan for you, Thomas," Father David would say. "I can feel it. You're going to do something remarkable." Thomas wanted desperately to believe that. But next door, someone was watching with growing suspicion. Charlie Morrison, 71, was Thomas's neighbor and unlikely guardian angel. Charlie had been a detective with the Detroit Police Department for 35 years before retiring. He had the instincts of a man who had seen every con, every lie, every manipulation tactic in the book. And from the moment Father David stepped into Thomas's life, Charlie's internal alarm system started ringing. There's something off about that guy. Charlie told his wife Patricia one evening while watching Father David leave Thomas's house. He's a priest, Charlie. You're paranoid, Patricia said, rolling her eyes. That's what keeps people safe. Healthy paranoia, Charlie muttered. He started paying attention. Small things at first. The way Father David always drove a different car. Sometimes a modest sedan, sometimes something nicer. The way he checked his phone constantly during conversations. The way his eyes would scan a room, calculating, measuring. Charlie had seen that look before, in interrogation rooms, in the eyes of men who were always working an angle. But Thomas saw none of it, because Thomas was too busy feeling grateful. Here's what people need to understand about manipulation. It doesn't start with a crime. It starts with kindness. It starts with someone identifying exactly what you need. Connection, purpose, validation, and then providing it generously, freely, until you feel in debt, until you feel like you owe them something. That's when the real game begins. You need to bind on air. In early November, Father David announced an ambitious project to the congregation, a school for underprivileged children in Haiti. He showed photographs, heartbreaking images of children in torn clothes, cramped classrooms with broken furniture, teachers with nowhere to teach. His voice trembled with passion as he described the vision. A proper building, desks, books, hope, hope. This isn't just charity, he said from the pulpit. This is about changing the trajectory of lives. One school can educate hundreds of children. Those children become doctors, teachers, leaders. That's how we change the world. The congregation was moved. Donations started coming in. But Father David had a special request for Thomas. He came to Thomas's house on a Wednesday evening, November 13th, 2019. He sat in the same chair where Eleanor used to sit, and Thomas felt a sharp pang in his chest. Thomas, I need to talk to you about something important, Father David began, his expression serious. God has been speaking to me about you. I've been praying, asking for guidance, and I keep hearing the same message. Thomas Harper is meant to be the cornerstone of this mission. Thomas blinked. Thomas blinked. Oh, I don't understand. The school in Haiti needs a primary donor. Someone whose name will be on the building. Someone whose legacy will live on in those children's futures. Thomas, I believe that person is you. Thomas's throat tightened. Father, I'm just a retired teacher. I don't have that kind of money. Father David leaned forward, his eyes intense. Thomas, you have more than you think. Eleanor left you well taken care of. I'm not asking you to give everything, just enough to make this dream real. $40,000 would build the entire first phase, the Thomas and Eleanor Harper School. The room seemed to spin. Eleanor's name. Elisha, Eleanor's name. Her memory. A legacy. Well, I I need to think about it, Thomas whispered. Of course, Father David said, standing and placing a hand on Thomas's shoulder. But Thomas, don't think too long. The contractors in Haiti are waiting. If we don't commit soon, we'll lose this opportunity. Sometimes God's timing requires immediate faith. This is a critical warning sign that everyone must recognize. Pressure to make quick financial decisions is almost always a red flag. Legitimate charitable organizations give you time to research, to think, to consult with family or financial advisors. Scammers create artificial urgency because thinking is their enemy. The moment someone says, "Decide now or lose this opportunity," your answer should be no. But Thomas didn't know that. He only knew that Father David made him feel important again. He wrote the check 3 days later. $40,000. Degay, Enchandelibuan, and Farsautapsikian. Nearly half of his retirement savings. Father David held the check like it was sacred, tears actually forming in his eyes. Thomas, God is going to bless you beyond measure. You'll see. Thomas felt proud. For the first time since Eleanor's death, he felt like he was doing something that mattered. Charlie saw Father David leaving that day, and the way the priest smiled as he walked to his car made Charlie's stomach turn. He made a decision that evening. He was going to find out exactly who Father David Mercer really was. What Charlie discovered over the next 2 weeks made his blood run cold. He started with the basics: public records, social media, anything he could find online. Father David Mercer had almost no digital footprint before arriving in Detroit 2 months ago. No previous church assignments listed anywhere. No photographs from seminary. Nothing. No. Charlie's detective instinct screamed. Identity fabrication. He drove to the Archdiocese of Detroit and spoke with someone in the administrative office, claiming to be writing a church newsletter. The woman checked her records, frowned, and said, "We don't have a Father David Mercer officially assigned to St. Augustine's. Father Raymond retired, but we're still in the process of finding a replacement." "Who did you say this person was?" Charlie felt his heart pounding. "Just someone I heard about. Must be mistaken. Thank you." He drove straight to Thomas's house and knocked on the door. Thomas answered, looking tired but happy. "Charlie, what's wrong? You look upset." "Thomas, we need to talk about Father David." Thomas's expression immediately closed off. "Not this again, Charlie. I know you don't like him, but..." "Thomas, I don't think he's a real priest." The words hung in the air like poison. Thomas stared at Charlie, then slowly shook his head. "You've gone too far. Father David has done more for me in 2 months than anyone has in 3 years. He's a good man." "I went to the Archdiocese, Thomas. They have no record of him." "Then you spoke to the wrong person. There are administrative errors all the time." "Thomas, listen to me." "No, Charlie. You listen to me. I'm tired of your suspicion, your conspiracy theories, your inability to see good in people. Father David is helping build a school for children. He's helping me heal. And you're..." The door closed in Charlie's face. Charlie stood there, frustrated and helpless. He knew what was happening. He had seen it 100 times in his career. But knowing and proving were two different things. And the victim has to be willing to see the truth. This is one of the most painful aspects of elder fraud: isolation. Scammers deliberately create distance between victims and anyone who might interfere. They position themselves as the only trustworthy person, and anyone who questions them becomes the enemy. Family members and friends often find themselves shut out, unable to help, watching helplessly as someone they love walks deeper into the trap. Charlie made another decision. If Thomas wouldn't listen, he would gather evidence Thomas couldn't ignore. He started following Father David. It wasn't difficult. Charlie had done surveillance for decades. He knew how to be invisible. He tracked Father David's movements over the next week, documenting everything. The pattern was disturbing. Father David visited multiple churches, not just St. Augustine's. Different congregations, different names possibly, always targeting smaller parishes where oversight was minimal. On November 28, 2019, Charlie followed Father David to the Athenaeum Suite Hotel in Greektown, one of Detroit's upscale locations. Father David parked a silver Mercedes, not the modest sedan he usually drove to church, and walked into the hotel lobby wearing expensive casual clothes, not priest's attire. Charlie waited 30 minutes, then entered the hotel. He spotted Father David in the restaurant, sitting with two elderly women, both well-dressed, both hanging on his every word. Charlie moved closer, pretending to check his phone, listening. "Ladies, your generosity is going to change lives," Father David was saying. "The orphanage in Guatemala is depending on people like you. Guatemala, Darinos, not Haiti." Different story, same game. Charlie felt sick. He took out his phone and snapped several photographs. Father David in civilian clothes, the Mercedes, the elderly women clearly being courted for money. As Charlie turned to leave, Father David's head suddenly swiveled. Their eyes met across the restaurant. For just a second, the mask slipped. Father David's expression went cold, calculating, dangerous. Then the smile returned. But it was too late. Charlie had seen the real face underneath. Father David stood abruptly, excusing himself from the women, and walked quickly toward the exit. Charlie realized he was being followed. He moved through the hotel lobby toward the parking garage, his heart pounding. He wasn't as young as he used to be, and Father David was faster. In the parking garage, Charlie heard footsteps behind him, echoing off concrete. He turned a corner, pressed himself against a pillar, waiting. "Ah!" Father David appeared, looking around, his face tense and angry. Charlie waited until Father David passed, then quickly moved in the opposite direction toward his car. He got in, started the engine, and drove away, checking his rearview mirror constantly. Father David stood in the garage, watching him leave, phone pressed to his ear. Charlie's hands were shaking. This was bigger than he thought. And Thomas was in real danger. The next day, Charlie printed the photographs and went to Thomas's house. Thomas answered the door, his face immediately hardening when he saw Charlie. "Thomas, just look at these before you say anything," Charlie said, holding out the photographs. Thomas reluctantly took them. His eyes scanned the images. Father David, in the Mercedes. Father David in expensive clothes. Father David with other elderly women in the hotel. This could be anything, Thomas said, but his voice wavered. He could have been doing church business. Thomas, he was telling those women about an orphanage in Guatemala. You gave money for a school in Haiti, don't you see? He's running the same con on multiple people in multiple churches. Thomas's hands started to shake. The photographs fell to the floor. No, you doctored these. You hate him, and you're trying to destroy what we're building. Thomas, for God's sake, get out of my house, Charlie, and don't come back. Ow. This is the tragedy of cognitive dissonance. When presented with evidence that contradicts deeply held beliefs, the human mind often rejects the evidence rather than the belief. It's too painful to accept that we've been fooled, that our judgment was wrong, that someone we trusted betrayed us. So we attack the messenger instead. This is why scammers succeed. Not because people are stupid, but because admitting you've been scammed feels like admitting you're stupid. And then I've fought. I've bet. Charlie left defeated. But he made one more call, this time to the Detroit Police Department Fraud Division. He handed over everything he had documented. They told him they would investigate, but these cases took time. Proving fraud required solid evidence, and Father David was careful. Meanwhile, Thomas's life continued down its dark path. By early December, Thomas noticed something strange. The church website had mentioned weekly updates about the Haiti School project, but nothing had been posted in weeks. He asked Father David about it after Sunday service on December 8th. Father David's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Thomas, construction projects take time. There are permits, local regulations, weather delays. These things don't happen overnight. Of course, Thomas said, feeling embarrassed for questioning. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. And never what you are. In shall. Everything is perfect, Father David said, gripping Thomas's shoulder a bit too tightly. Your faith is what makes this possible. I need you. I go. I'm jai. What's a door? But doubt had entered Thomas's mind, small and insidious. That evening he did something he hadn't done before. He searched online for Father David Mercer Haiti School. Nothing came up. He tried different search terms. Still nothing. He searched for St. Augustine Church, Detroit, Haiti Project. No results. His chest tightened. He called the church office the next morning, asking to speak with the church council about the Haiti project. The secretary sounded confused. I'm sorry, Mr. Harper, but we don't have any international projects currently registered with the council. Where did you hear about this? Thomas's world tilted. Father David told us. Oh, Father David's personal projects aren't officially church projects, Mr. Harper. He handles those independently. Thomas hung up. His hands were shaking. Independently. Me. Why did not share? Pious. Personal projects. He spent the next 3 days in agony, trying to rationalize it. Maybe Father David worked through a different organization. Maybe the church secretary was wrong. Maybe, maybe. On December 12th, 2019, Thomas drove to the Athenaeum Suite Hotel. He didn't know why. Some instinct pulled him there. He parked across the street and waited, feeling foolish. And then he saw it. The silver Mercedes pulled up to the valet. Father David stepped out, wearing a tailored suit. Thomas estimated cost more than a teacher's monthly salary. A young woman in expensive clothes kissed him on the cheek. They walked into the hotel together, laughing. Thomas felt something break inside his chest. He sat in his car for 2 hours, crying. Everything Charlie had said was true. Everything. He had given $40,000 to a lie. When Thomas finally went home, he found Charlie sitting on his front porch, waiting. "I saw your car at the hotel," Charlie said quietly. "I've been tracking him, hoping you'd never have to see it yourself." Thomas sat down next to Charlie, his face wet with tears. "I was so stupid." "No," Charlie said firmly. "You were hopeful. That's not the same thing. This man is a professional predator. He knew exactly how to target you. What do I do?" Charlie handed him a business card. "This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Fraud Division. I've already filed a report. They're building a case. But Thomas, I need you to do something hard. I need you to confront him, publicly, in front of the congregation. We need him to break character so people will listen." Thomas looked at the card, then at Charlie. "I don't know if I can." "You can," Charlie said. "Because if you don't, he'll do this to someone else. Someone else's Eleanor will be dishonored. Someone else's retirement will be stolen." Thomas closed his eyes and nodded. Sunday, December 15th, 2019, St. Augustine's Church was full. The Christmas season always brought out more congregants. Father David was in the middle of his sermon, talking about the spirit of giving, when Thomas stood up from his pew. "I have a question, Father," Thomas said, his voice shaking but loud enough to carry. Father David paused, his expression carefully neutral. "Of course, Thomas. What is it? Where is the school?" Silence rippled through the church. Father David smiled. "Thomas, as I've explained, construction takes—" "Where is the school, Father?" Thomas repeated, louder now. "I gave you $40,000 3 months ago. There's been no update, no photographs, no proof. Where is my money?" Murmurs spread through the congregation. Father David's smile tightened. "No, Thomas, I understand you're grieving, and grief can make us confused." "Don't you dare," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "Don't you dare use my wife's memory to cover your lies. You are not a priest. The Archdiocese has no record of you. You're running the same con on multiple churches, telling different stories, stealing from elderly people who trust you." Father David's mask began to crack. His voice lost its warmth. "Mr. Harper, you're clearly unwell. Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately." "No," Thomas shouted. "Everyone needs to hear this. This man is a fraud. He's stolen from me, and he's probably stolen from others. Someone call the police." Father David's expression went cold and hard. "You senile old fool. You gave that money willingly. You signed the check. You can't prove anything." The congregation gasped. The real David Mercer had finally appeared. Charlie, who had been sitting in the back, stood up and pulled out his phone, playing a recording. Father David's voice filled the church. "Ladies, your generosity is going to change lives. The orphanage in Guatemala is depending on people like you. That's you at the Athenaeum Hotel 4 weeks ago," Charlie said, telling different women a different story. Guatemala, not Haiti. "How many cons are you running, David? Or is that even your real name?" Father David's face flushed with rage. He stepped down from the pulpit, moving toward Thomas. "You have no idea what you've done, old man." But before he could reach Thomas, the church doors burst open. 8 FBI agents flooded into the sanctuary, weapons drawn. "Well, David Mercer, FBI, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse across state lines." The congregation screamed. Father David tried to run toward the side exit, but agents blocked his path. They tackled him to the ground in front of the altar, the sacred space, now a crime scene. As they handcuffed him, Special Agent Jennifer Torres approached. "Thomas, Mr. Harper? I'm with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. We've been investigating Mr. Mercer, real name David Kellerman, for 18 months. He's wanted in 6 states for similar crimes. Your..." Thomas collapsed into a pew, overwhelmed. Agent Torres sat next to him. "Mr. Harper, I need you to understand something. David Kellerman has stolen approximately $3.27 victims over the past 8 years. He targets religious communities specifically. As FBI agents escorted David Kellerman out of the church, he turned back one last time, looking directly at Thomas. His voice was cold, empty of the warmth that had once comforted. "You people are so easy. You want to believe in something bigger so badly. You'll hand over everything without question. You think you're faithful. You're just desperate." Thomas stared back, and for the first time, he didn't feel shame. He felt anger. Good, clean, righteous anger. "You're wrong," Thomas said quietly. "Faith isn't weakness, but you taught me something important. Faith should be in God, not in men who claim to speak for him." The doors closed. In the weeks that followed, the full extent of David Kellerman's crimes emerged. He had no religious training whatsoever. He had studied psychology and theater in college before dropping out and beginning his career as a con artist. He specifically researched grief, loneliness, and the psychology of religious communities. He created elaborate fake identities, complete with forged credentials. He moved from city to city, targeting churches with aging congregations and minimal oversight. Thomas recovered $31,000 of his stolen money through the FBI's Victim Restitution Program. It wasn't everything, but it was something. More importantly, he discovered something unexpected. He wasn't alone. A support group formed among Kellerman's victims. Thomas met others who had been manipulated, stolen from, and betrayed. Among them was a woman named Grace, whose father had given Kellerman $60,000 and committed suicide when he discovered the truth. "My dad didn't survive this," Grace said at one of their meetings, tears in her eyes. "But because you stood up, because you confronted him publicly, My father's death meant something. You stopped Kellerman from destroying more families." Thomas held her hand, crying with her. Charlie remained his loyal friend, never once saying, "I told you so." Instead, he helped Thomas create a presentation about elder fraud that they delivered to churches, community centers, and senior organizations throughout Detroit. Thomas returned to St. Augustine's, but it took time. The church brought in a legitimate priest, Father Michael O'Brien, who had extensive credentials and references. Father O'Brien's first sermon was about trust, betrayal, and healing. God doesn't need con artists to do his work, Father O'Brien said from that same pulpit where Kellerman had once stood. God works through ordinary people showing extraordinary kindness. The building doesn't matter. The programs don't matter. What matters is how we treat each other with honesty, transparency, and love. Thomas sat in his usual pew, Eleanor's photograph in his pocket, and for the first time in months, felt something like peace. He learned lessons that he wished he had known before. What Thomas wants everyone to understand: always verify charitable organizations independently. Don't rely solely on what the solicitor tells you. Legitimate charities provide detailed information about their projects, including registration numbers, websites, and regular updates. Never make large financial decisions under pressure or urgency. Real opportunities don't disappear overnight. If someone isolates you from family or friends who raise concerns, that's a red flag, not loyalty. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Research religious figures through official channels. Credentials should be easily verifiable. Critical mistakes to avoid: don't give cash or checks to individuals claiming to represent organizations. Donate directly to verified organizations. Don't share personal financial information with anyone, regardless of their title or position. Don't ignore warnings from people who care about you, even if the warnings are uncomfortable. Don't let emotional vulnerability override practical caution. Don't assume that religious settings are immune to fraud. Predators specifically target faith communities because of inherent trust. Don't feel ashamed if you've been victimized. Shame keeps people silent, and silence protects predators. Thomas learned that faith and wisdom aren't opposites, they're partners. You can believe in goodness while still being cautious. You can trust in God while still verifying credentials. You can be hopeful while still being smart. 6 months after David Kellerman's arrest, Thomas stood at Eleanor's grave with fresh flowers. He knelt down, touching the headstone gently. "I almost dishonored your memory," he whispered. "I almost let someone use your name for evil. But I stopped him, Eleanor. And maybe in some way, that's the legacy you would have wanted. Not a building with our names on it, but protecting others from harm." A gentle wind moved through the cemetery, rustling the leaves. Thomas smiled. "I'm okay now. I'm going to be okay." And for the first time since her death, he believed it.